Hello and welcome to the GENART Podcast. I'm your host, Camille Roux, delighted to have you here for our fourth episode. The market is quite complex and unpredictable these days. The ecosystem is ever changing, so it's probably a good time to ask what is the future of generative art. In your opinion, how will our discipline evolve? What trends do you see emerging soon? Will AI become a part of our field? What will the market look like in a few months or years? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and prediction. Please share your insight by leaving a message after the beep. Thank you.
Hey Camille, Owen here. I was thinking about the question you had about the future of generative art, and I feel that artists are going to go out into the real world through local exhibitions, art fairs, events, online shops, and find greater acceptance for the medium. We've had decades of digital art not really commanding the same level of respect as a lot of physical mediums, but with entire generations now growing up in a digital world, and they're quite comfortable with the idea of these digital things having value, I think it's going to lead to more respect for those who craft digitally. That said, I don't think we're going to see a resurgence, or mass adoption for that matter, of collecting generative art as purely digital artifacts like we've seen in recent years through NFTs. Blockchains are likely going to be abstracted away and used as part of authoring certificates authenticity, cataloging artists' work, or just purely for archival reasons. I see there's probably two paths of opportunities that lie ahead. First is bringing generative art into the real world. I feel like this will come about from artists who practice producing physical works from generative systems. Of course, many already do this through plotters and printing, but I feel there's room to innovate both on the aesthetics and the mediums used. For example, an artist could use a mini computer to run an animated algorithm on a small screen, while using another algorithm to 3D print a matching sculptural enclosure. The other opportunity is brands partnering with artists. They're already exploring made-to-order production processes, and we've seen some limited runs with embroidery and knitted sweaters. But I think we're going to see known brands working with the artists who really love fashion and design to produce higher quality limited edition generative runs. Everybody loves to be a part of something, and that's typically what brands represent. But they also love individualism to some degree and expressing it through the items they purchase. And that's where I think generative systems can really lend brands a helping hand on these limited editions. Or maybe we'll see entirely new brands emerge from the more entrepreneurial among us. Actually, I'm going to cross my fingers for that. That sounds much more exciting. Anyways, I think the future of generative art is quite bright, especially for those willing to bring some fresh perspectives to light. Chat with you later. Bye-bye.
Hi, Camille. Jacek Markusiewicz again. I feel that we are about to face a difficult situation. Not necessarily bad, difficult, but inevitable because it's a direct result of the popularization of art that we witnessed in the last years. So the culture of generative art and Web3 emerged in part as some sort of antithesis to the traditional art world, with its exclusiveness, very established institutions, all the inertias. And in contrast to that, we saw an almost unprecedented accessibility and ubiquity of means of artistic expression through Web3 technology, social media, more recently, generative AI, that all made art more inclusive and attracted many artists and enthusiasts. The consequence of it is that it gained so much popularity that now we have a lot of creative content, especially in the last months, generated massively by AI. But not only that, also there are simply so many people expressing themselves artistically. It's a good thing, but there's so much stuff that it's even hard to go through it superficially judge what we are interested in, not to mention to spend quality time with the art. And I think this must eventually lead to the feeling of being overwhelmed and to the feeling of fatigue. And as a result, to a hopefully temporary loss of interest for many people. Paradoxically, something that can reverse this process is to come back to some practices that we know from the traditional art world, such as curation, the role of galleries that filter the content for us, lower this pressure of being flooded by art, so that we can focus again on contemplating what we like. And I think when this synthesis happens, if the synthesis happens sometime in the future, then we will look back at 2024 and we will discover how valuable it was. That there was a time in history when art became a wide social phenomenon, when so many people were passionate about art that it's almost uncomparable to any other moment in history.
All right. Hello, Camille. This is Will.
Hey, it's Trinity. What's up?
And this is the Waiting to Be Signed podcast, calling in to talk about the future of generative art, or what exactly the future holds for generative art. Trinity, where do you want to start?
My first instinct is that the future of generative art is not going to be great if we look far enough ahead with the heat death of the universe. Mm-hmm. My instinct is that we need to get some chromy squiggles onto an interstellar probe, send it off into space, and just see what those other civilizations have to say about it.
See if they understand the value of the color spread, or whether or not it's a pipe versus a fuzzy. I don't even know all the squiggle treats.
Yeah.
Okay. End of time notwithstanding, I think we have a pretty good grasp on the current trends, which have been to make the discipline viable for a fewer and fewer number of artists. But where do you see that going? Do you think that there's hope to go back to where we were in 2020, 2021 with a much broader set of artists being supported? Or do you think we can expect to see further consolidation?
I think it's going to go back and forth. It's just going to really be contingent on the crypto boom cycles. Short-term prognosis, we're really seeing the let's sell tens, if not hundreds of thousands of things for free or at very low cost, or let's sell a very small number of editions for a few $100s. And we're not seeing success really in the middle. I think we'll continue to see that for a little bit until we have a more secure market, assuming that the more secure market comes back.
I think I agree. Yeah, I think unfortunately we will just see the generative art market as a whole, when it comes to Web3 and NFTs, start to turn more and more into what the traditional art market looks like, which is a lot of people creating stuff for themselves for fun with little to no expectation of selling it, and a very, very small number of artists that break through and get some kind of gallery style representation, through platforms or through whatever else might emerge. And hopefully, maybe as a positive spin on that, seeing the traditional market through big auction houses or other players start to really embrace this side of the discipline and get into digital art more broadly, generative art, and kind of get it to a wider audience. That's my hope. I don't know if it's the actual future, I guess. I do hope that there's long-term careers for some artists here. But what about the discipline itself? I mean, do you think that we should expect to see more ambitious stuff? And I think, we've talked to some people recently, like Eric from Art Blocks, who are really trying to push the multimedia side of generative art a lot more. So do you think we'll see a big evolution in that direction?
I think so. I think that even in the last couple of years, we've seen the consistent quality of generative art just continue to get higher and higher. We've had these really ambitious projects come out, things that would have 1000% have blown our minds if they came out 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're seeing more people getting deeper into the discipline, and that's just incredibly good for the discipline overall. Not saying that art that came out, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 50 years ago is lesser than, but that we're just seeing so much energy being put into the space. And I think that we'll continue to see some more of that consolidation of that energy. Even if there are fewer people in the space overall, it's still way more than there were 10 years ago. I love it.
With something that we've talked about a lot is like the idea that you might be able to go buy a generative poster or piece of furniture at IKEA. I mean, is there perhaps a future where we have people whose jobs are like generative designer versus generative artists who might be trying to sell something on art blocks? I could definitely see that being a direction that the whole space goes in, provided like certain things can happen. Like the cost to produce things continues to go down, print on demand, like printing a 1 of 1 of X being equivalent cost to printing a 1 of 10,000, right?
I agree with that. As you said, it's really about just getting the costs down. And I think it's also going to be partially, a measure of the economy, which is not a world that we probably want to talk about in this voicemail. But, I think as long as people have surplus dollars to spend on something that's a little bit more special, a little bit nicer, then I can totally see that being the future. As we see the potential proliferation of digital worlds, blockchain collectibles, that sort of thing, that also continues to make sense. Maybe it's more on the PFP side that makes sense rather than generatively speaking, but people want to have their digital representation. That was part of the power of the community of Squiggles. What do you think about that?
I'm always skeptical of virtual worlds in gaming because I have yet to see it really stick, but I don't doubt that someday one of them will break through and become a big thing. We have obviously lots of virtual worlds that people really love, like Roblox and stuff, but they just don't do NFTs necessarily and digital ownership. But I think similar to that, like displays and other ways for people to enjoy their art, and especially art that's not just still art, right? I think a lot of us who have stuck around in the space for the last few years or had been in it prior to that are very accustomed to collecting plots and collecting prints and having those physical things. But for the discipline itself to kind of evolve, I think, in the direction it wants to go, and I think a good number of artists want to take it, which is this interactive, data-driven motion, sound, all of that. We need these displays to kind of become affordable and become natively designed to work with this stuff. Like I have a Samsung frame and it's just not good at displaying animated work because it has to go through a crappy Android powered browser.
And I think at that point, we're also putting generative art more firmly in the luxury goods space. Mm-hmm. Obviously, any sort of art that can be purchased for a medium to high price is going to be more of on that luxury side. But I think conversely, we have the power of social minting and the social side of things that we've also seen doing really well over the last couple of months, especially over on Farcaster and frame minting. And I think that as things continue to expand out, it'd be amazing for the space to just see that ability to easily mint maybe 1 or 2 editions, just put them up, go on with your life rather than needing to make a huge platform play. I see that as something being really good for the space, just for getting more people involved, interested, learning even just basic P5 tutorials on coding train, and getting more people in collecting as well. Mm-hmm. Whether it's on the blockchain or not, I don't know.
Probably the murkiest part for the future of generative art has to be the role that AI is playing now and could play in the future. We've already seen this conflation, or I should say this inclusion of AI being generative art, which it is in the broadest definition. But I think collectors like us try to make this mental distinction between code-based generative art and art that's made through prompting or model training. How are these things going to interact? Because I can see, using a code caddy style partner for generative artists to leverage all the open libraries there are and all the projects that are already existing to then create more and better and more performative work in the future, but also like hybridization, like we've seen with like mprops and stuff. So what do you think AI is going to mean?
The AI has a couple of different flavors. It's the image generation, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. I don't know how much that's going to play into it. I think that we'll see more of a market shift toward those types of art, and that's what we've seen. But we know at least one artist who's heavily used like ChatGPT as like a coding tool just to produce some really great stuff. And that's where maybe we'll see a divide where people who are more like code purists will have the Peter Pasmas of the world versus the people who have a really strong idea, may not necessarily know how to execute it cleanly or quickly, and they can lean more into the coding tools. What I'm interested in is, what about people who are using Gen AI to help come up with concepts? Where does that fall within like the future of Gen AI and generative art coming together?
I mean, I think we already know of painters using generative AI to prompt and to come up with like original images through that process, which they then sit down and paint and put their own spin on. I'm trying to remember who I saw recently who did this, but they would basically prompt up like a set of impressionistic flowers, pick the ones they found interesting, but then further embellish on that with their own. So kind of using the AI to develop a form and maybe a color palette that they like, but then still they're not painting it one-to-one. They're doing their own original interpretation of that image. So we're already kind of seeing that integrated, at least in the practice of some artists. But what could a code-based artist do? Do you have the AI come up with an interesting algorithm first that you then work off of? Or do you have it come up with an interesting image that you then say, hey, I think there's generative potential there. I want to try to find, you come up with a crazy geometric image or colorful grid. Everyone likes a good colorful grid project. So maybe you could use AI to come up with some novel takes on some styles that have already been pretty well explored.
Who knows? I guess my question in reverse, or back to you, should they be putting that out there as a part of the artist statement?
Ooh.
Do they need to say that I used AI to make this piece?
Yeah, that feels like a really tricky one where there's probably artists that we know who have used AI in some aspect of their process, and maybe they felt it's not significant enough to even mention it, or they kind of just mention it as a side note because it was kind of a funny origin story for the piece. But are they duty bound to say I use AI, even if it's like the smallest aspect of the project? I don't know. I mean, saying it now is kind of good, right? Because AI art is selling like crazy. So probably anyone who's using it wants to advertise they're using it, but that sentiment could shift in the future. As the asker of the question, do you think that they should have to disclose, or?
I think that it's really up to the individual. I think we'll just have to see as the NFT art space evolves, the digital art space. It's going to be more about the divide between code-based, regardless of how that code is generated. And I think AI generated images, just because right at this point, the space is so big, there's only so much liquidity. Where is that going to go? How are people going to spend their dollars? And at this point, if people are able to see really easy returns through prompt-based image generation, I don't know. Hopefully we don't lose more people to that side of the house.
Well, that's not for us to worry about in this answer. I think we should wrap it up there. Thanks to Camille for having us on.
Excited to see what you think.
Yeah. Cue the next caller. There we go. Bye, everyone.
There's talk around the town, or have you heard? They say generative art is becoming absurd, but the whispers in the alleys, they're never true. For the art that never sleeps, it's got a spark so new. With algorithms dancing and colors that collide, pixelated dreams come alive, they can't hide. Brushstrokes by the bytes in a digital parade. The future of our art won't ever fade. No.
Hey Camille, it's Haiver. I think one of the things that I'm excited for generative artists is that as the market in Web3 has gotten more difficult to navigate and the money has dried up a little bit, it means that generative artists are going to start to need to branch out to digital art events and go to organizations that have existed for years, Ars Electronica, New Ink, or realize that there are galleries out there like Bitforums or museums like Heck that have been championing digital art for incredibly long amounts of time. So artists will start applying to residencies and grants and starting to build up deeper and broader networks of support for themselves so that they can build a longer career. I think what will happen along the way is that we're going to see the next generation start to come up, people who are more native to code than even our generations were. I think one of the strange things about the last 3 years is that a lot of people had not experienced generative art at all until the big boom of 2021. And so every artwork felt new, and it felt like art with a big capital A. And 3 years later, the thing we're realizing is a lot of those pieces were tech demos and small experiments built on tutorials that had been around for at least a few years, if not longer. And the quality of art is only going to go up from here because so many more people are familiar and versed with what basic generative art looks like. They're going to be much more attuned when they see artists doing something unique, that it will stand out more frequently. It was very easy for projects to get lost in the glut, the constant stream of new projects coming out. And artists are going to have to chip away at their practices now. They're going to have to get weird and introspective and discover what makes them tick as an artist. They're going to have to find techniques that they learn the basic version of, then they learn the advanced version of, and then they tinker with it until they break it. And then they figure out some new parts that they can add in, combining equations together from different sources, and suddenly find something new. And that's going to be work. And they're going to have to do it like all artists have for centuries, with the faith that on the other side of the experimentation, something good is going to come out of it. And they're going to have to accept what artists have largely lived by for time immemorial, which is you make something not knowing if anyone is going to appreciate it or value it. We had a moment where people appreciated so much stuff that may or may not have been worth appreciating, but it put generative on the map. And artists are going to have to get comfortable with the discomfort of the not knowing, of the experiment, of the rooting around in the dark, and the act of hope that what they're doing is meaningful and beautiful, even if it's only appreciated by 20 people instead of 1,000 people. And if it's only appreciated by the eye and not by the wallet. And that's good for the art in the long term. And I know that's hard to hear because we want the space to be able to make our art on a more regular basis. And that's what sales do for us as artists. But I think the art will be better for it in the long run because we're going to get things we've never seen before and artists who go down weird rabbit holes and discover.
Hi, Camille. This is Jonathan from Quebec. Sorry if you hear some noise. I'm outside. But yeah, so to answer your question about generative art, what's next for generative art? I believe that everything's possible, really. I still have an optimist view of the medium, of the artists, of the space, of the community and everything. I think this is just going to continue to grow. And it's gonna expand because I think art is like research, and the more the more research you do, the further you go. So I think we're gonna see more and more impressive stuff in the future. But right now, the Web3 space, it's pretty. It feels like a ghost town right now, and I'm a pretty intuitive guy, I think, and my spider senses kind of told me to maybe start looking for other ways to make my art seen, known, or sold. So yeah, I think it's not gonna disappear like NFTs and stuff. It's really not, but I think we're in for a rough patch. Just by seeing the overall sentiment of the whole thing, like all the discords that are kind of empty now. And yeah, it's a bit heartbreaking. I really liked the camaraderie and the space overall. And, I went to Marfa last year and I saw it with my own eyes. And it was like... It was like going to Hogwarts for like a weekend in the desert, like Hogwarts in the desert anyway. But yeah, finding so much like-minded people and, vibing and stuff. Because when you do generative art, you're kind of, or NFT in general, I think you're kind of alone behind your computer, because it's such an international movement and community that like we're all connected through the internet, but in reality, we're kind of in our own space alone. So yeah, seeing that in Marfa really like made me see all the cool things that this space was and how we could interact with each other. But right now, when I go in my favorite Discords and there's like maybe one good morning, one art post, and then nothing, no interactions. Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking. So for that, I'm really not sure what's going to happen in the next couple weeks, couple of months, or even years. Like for all we know, maybe in August it's going to be like 2021, although I doubt it. But it cannot be predicted. So yeah, this is why I'm trying to find some other ways to do my stuff, like selling prints, maybe converting Ex Libris to a physical only thing. Like, I don't know, maybe you could collect it on FXH for free, and I don't know, and maybe get the bookmarks for like $5. I don't know. I'm trying to find some ways to get more people to know about generative art and my art. But I'm trying to find those people outside of the Web3 space right now, because the Web3 space is such like a tiny fraction of the whole market, or of the whole possibility of people interested in what we do, that I think it's the same thing to do right now, for me at least. And, I don't know, maybe making deals with, collaboration with brands and, stuff like that, doing gallery show. So, yeah. So I think for the Web3 space, it's a bit more hard to predict. But overall, generative art is not stopping. We are not stopping. This is a continued research thing, and stuff are just going to look better and better. So yeah, fasten your seatbelt, guys, because art's not going anywhere, and it's gonna look better, and it's gonna look damn good. So this is Jonathan, and signing out. Thank you, Camille, and I hope you have a great weekend. Goodbye.
Hi, Camille. It's Haiver. I feel like so many things are about to happen for generative art. I mean, AI art has kind of stolen the term generative. We can't use it as a hashtag for helping people find our work anymore. I mean, AI art does belong in the category of generative. It is generated in that moment, but it is this real shame to have this term that we've used for so many decades suddenly getting consumed by the behemoth of AI. So I think one of the things that's going to probably happen is that we're going to need to find another term or phrase for how we talk about what we're doing, what we've defined as generative art, either by calling it code-based generative art, or I like the term algorithmic art. It kind of points to the fact that we're writing algorithms, that it is us doing the work rather than calling on some large language model or database of information. So I think that's going to happen. I also think the tent of what is generative art is going to widen. It's going to start to include artists who work with Touch Designer and Blender and Unity in more interesting ways, that we're going to stop focusing on just the long form generative art form that became really popular in the last 3 years with collectors. And so I think there's going to be more space to include more types of people working with algorithms and systems in their art outside of that JavaScript-based tool set. On top of that, I would encourage most artists to focus more on short form pieces these days, not just because of the market changes, but because they provide an opportunity to connect with individual collectors. That really lets you strengthen the kind of long-term relationships you can build a career on.
No, it's not dead, it's just beginning to start. With ones and zeros, it's creating heart. A symphony of pixels, a canvas so divine. Generative art's future, it's truly fine.
Hi, Camille. It's yourself. The question is quite complex, and probably the first thing I can do is try to describe the market from my point of view. What I see is first probably a loss of interest. For example, posts on X or Farcaster about generative art seem to get less engagement as before. I also see that platforms have significantly reduced the number of drops. They take fewer risks. Price of the project are lower. Same for the number of editions. The number of editions for each project, which are also decreasing. I also see a lot of artists returning to their original jobs. Some accept freelance work, and at least a lot of them are seriously considering it because the market is very low currently. Probably it's not specific to generative art. We can see bear markets in other art sectors, and probably in outside of the art world right now. This raises question about the future of the long-form format and more globally generative art. Will this format, which has been the star of generative art since 2021, continue to be popular? I don't think so. Not that way. Good opportunities to drop long-form pieces are becoming so rare that many artists are exploring and will continue to explore other formats, sometimes close, sometimes very different. This might be sometimes low-priced open edition with still long form, but probably some artists will explore one-on-one or small collections or even physical art. But it's important to highlight the fact that generative art is not dead. It just maybe a new space, a new step in this art, in the history of this art. First of all the art created during this period will stay, of course. This period allowed tens of thousands of projects to be published, seen, exhibited worldwide, and that's really amazing. It helped bring digital art and creative coding into the spotlight, and this is really great. Another point is I'm convinced that it would leave a lot of subtle mark on the art of tomorrow. Many aspects like the use of randomness, the notion of traits, the use of the blockchain will likely continue to be used, maybe not together, maybe not the same way, but will probably exist. We have worked with that for years now, and it's really cool, and we are going to play with it. Finally, I can give a summary of my plan in the future. I'm still working on long form. One of them will be published in a few weeks, I guess. I will probably reduce the time I'm spending on long form and try to explore other formats. It will be probably sometime one-on-one, sometime projection mapping and installation, maybe commissions. I love to do that. I will also explore soon the local art market in my city and my country. For example, I'm currently learning how to use Touch Designer because probably the fact to do everything using code will become a niche, and So yeah, it can be fun to explore other way and maybe simpler way to create art. So it's also something I'm exploring. Yeah, it's just the beginning of brainstorming about that, but I will be maybe change my mind a lot of time. But yeah, I take that as a challenge to explore new way to produce, sell art. Let's see where this is going. But yeah, I'm not afraid with this market and just take it as a challenge. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. Bye-bye.
Hey Camille, it's cari and sham. Thanks for this question. The future for generative art definitely involves AI. AI is working in a generative way, so it's a nice pairing for the generative artist. It's interesting to work with a chat GPT and prompt it to write code. I enjoy writing code and then giving that code to a chat GPT and then seeing what it does with it. If I ask it to change it, modify it, add something to it. It's been a fun way to play around with AI. I also enjoy working with mprops and using my code as a way of prompting along with other prompts and settings to create new work. This has been very satisfying for me. The market right now is not what it was, and that's okay. I feel like that forces us to work harder. I do think that for the future of generative art, high, deep, and wide, I hope to see more exploration with movement, with 3D objects, with creating XR world spaces, with sound, and with video. I would like to see more of that happening. Not to say that the 2D aspect is not worth developing, but I feel like there's so much more we can do generatively. So I'm excited to see how we can push that envelope. I think that the market will come around. I think that our biggest job right now as generative artists is to onboard people and explain to them why the blockchain is so powerful. And I do think that eventually people will show up and be really excited about the work that exists already and that there will be investments into that space. So I hope that everyone just sticks in and stays with it, helps to grow it, and helps to explain and onboard new people, because that's what we need. We need to grow our collectors, our fans, and bring on new artists as well to create excitement and to attract and have global adoption.
Hey, Camille, it's Haiver. I feel like the obvious answer is generative design, that we'll start to see more unique one-of-one products. We've already been doing generative manufacturing for years. Football jerseys are a good example of that, or on-demand printing of self-published books. I think it's really exciting to think of having a shirt that is just mine. Right now, I'm in the process of decorating the new apartment that I moved into recently. I'm trying to get rid of a lot of IKEA items. That was good for me at one age, and at this age, I want things that express more personality and that not everybody has. So I think we've all experienced that on some level. But recently shopping for this apartment, I started getting a lot of Instagram ads, and it taught me a flip side to that, which is when an ad shows me a product and I connect with that product, I want that exact version in that moment. I don't want to go roll 50 versions of it trying to get something that's 5 to 10% better. I liked it because I like the pattern on it. I like that the palette of it matches both my taste and the space that I'm trying to decorate. Most of the tool sets on platforms in the generative art space that let us choose the exact features that we want for a piece, or to infinitely explore an algorithm until we find an output we like, often lead to decision fatigue for collectors. I've talked to a lot of collectors who don't want to purchase things in that mode and find it kind of exhausting. So we haven't done enough experience design research to understand how consumers work. And as much as I love generative, I have a lot of caution around our ability to apply the best things about generative to products. And we really haven't cracked the nut yet of how the tool sets themselves should work and how much choice is the right amount of choice. Do consumers even want as much choice as we have enjoyed as collectors and artists over the last few years? I'm not completely convinced of that fact. And I think the tool sets need to be refined a lot more, and we need to do a lot more to understand consumer habits and practices before we're going to be ready for generative design. It's a beautiful idea out on the horizon. I think it's the answer that many people will give to this question, but we're not there yet, even within our own community. So the idea of expanding it outward to encompass the broader marketplace doesn't make a lot of sense just yet.
How many times will Haiver speak? Twice, thrice, or countless street? Words like rivers flowing free, echoes in the old oak tree.
Hi, Camille. It's Stevan Dedovic again. When it comes to the future of generative art, I have very high hopes. First, I want to say it's very difficult to define generative art precisely. I know many generative artists who have made works that are not strictly generative, or maybe they have some works that fall into other categories or classifications first, and then are generative art second. So what I say as the future of generative art is maybe more accurately said as the future of this wide variety of emerging processes, emerging mediums, and new ways of thinking. The good news for us as generative artists is that old institutions are really taking the art seriously. We have places like Christie's, Sotheby's, which are some of the biggest fine art brokers and auction houses, selling NFTs. Generative artists and their art is being used in TV shows, movies, advertisements, and it is really becoming mainstream. Top of this, we have an influx of new artists and new patrons. In the USA, for example, computer science and technology are some of the fastest growing college degrees measured by new graduates. And as more and more kids go into these industries, we'll have more people who can understand and appreciate generative art. We'll have more collectors, we'll have more sales, and more variety. That said, though, generative art doesn't have to just be algorithmic or software engineering, but I am a little biased in that direction. As for future trends, I really don't know, but personally, what I want to see more of is hardware and more custom machines, more use of physical mediums. I know of a lot of artists who use pen plotters or painting machines of various types, and I think that interaction between this essentially imperfect medium, pens or paper, felt, watercolor, the way it leaks, all of that, and how that interacts with the cold precision of mechanics and machines, I think can be explored much further. And then as for AI in art, I think the impact, frankly, is a bit overblown. I know a few hard AI artists, people that focus on the AI aspect in the art being the centerpiece. And they do make truly amazing art, and it stands entirely on its own. But I think that a lot of the AI art that we see now, to me at least, feels very gimmicky or low effort. And I think most people do see that. I think that if we look at ChatGPT as an example, it's a great tool for creating stories or songs, or essentially creating things that look like normal human grammars, normal human language, but it just cannot compete with novelty. It doesn't have emotion behind it. And in my opinion, it just isn't real artistry. And in my own use of this, I'm able to recreate a lot of things. I'm able to modify things, create a song, let's say, but it just doesn't give me a lasting, deep feeling. In any case, thanks for having me on, and talk again soon.